Good morning. My name's Joanne Eynon. I'm Principal Manager at the Mining Remediation Authority, and my role within the organisation is to manage the process of providing permission to access abandoned coal mine workings for the purpose of a mine water heat scheme. So as an outline today, I'll be just going through a little bit about the context for a mine water heat scheme, how we at the Mining Remediation Authority can help to facilitate access to the abandoned coal mines, and the process for applying for a new agreement. If anybody has any questions to ask, if you can pop those into the Q&A, and I'll take those at the end of the presentation. I'll also be referring to a couple of documents throughout the presentation, and the last slide will show you how to access those documents and get a copy of them should you wish to do so. This is the second of a series of 3 webinars, which are looking at the options for utilising the water within abandoned mines for a source of low carbon heating. So we had Gareth Farr yesterday, who gave an introduction to the different opportunities that were available and how you would go about identifying whether there's an opportunity in your area. And then tomorrow we've got Dr. Fiona Todd, who's going to talk about the research and development that's moving the industry forwards. So just a bit about the context for mine water heat schemes. So water that is within abandoned coal mines is warmed by natural geothermal processes. The mines are flooded as mining ceased and the pumps were turned off. Over time, those water levels have recovered and filled the mines with the water. Generally, the temperatures are ranging from 10 to 20 degrees Celsius in terms of the schemes that we're looking at, but they can reach temperatures of around 40 degrees Celsius at around 1 kilometre deep. So the water within the mines gets warmer the deeper you go. The thermal properties of that water can be used to provide secure low carbon heating and cooling to buildings. And the opportunity for this is that around 25% of homes and businesses in the United Kingdom are located over former coal mines. In terms of bringing forward the opportunities, there are 3 types of scheme. One is a standalone open loop scheme, and this is where we'd be a scheme where you'd be looking at abstracting and discharging mine water. So the majority of these are likely to come through schemes that operate through abstracting water from a borehole, perhaps at a deeper seam, and then discharging it back into the workings at a shallower seam, dependent upon the connections between those boreholes. There is also waste heat schemes where a scheme can be using a mine water treatment scheme where the water is already discharged to surface. And a closed loop scheme, which would generally operate through a borehole or potentially a shaft, where water isn't necessarily moved around, but the heat properties of the water is utilised. For the purpose of this presentation, I'll be focusing on how you can get permissions for these standalone open loop schemes. So I put up a graphic there that was produced by the British Geological Survey, and that shows sort of a general outline of how a scheme could work with through 2 boreholes, with a borehole deeper, abstracting the water, passed through a heat exchanger, the heat distributed potentially to a network of buildings, and then that water is re-injected. To do this requires access to Mining Remediation Authority property, which is generally most of the unworked coal and abandoned coal mines. And we give permission through a number of different routes. So we have permits, which could be permit for drilling your borehole, for monitoring the level of the water, which is important to understand what's going on in the workings as to whether to ensure that the workings are flooded and that they would remain flooding. Water sampling, which could be looking at the chemistry data, also as well the temperature, and mine gas monitoring. So all these things can be facilitated under a short-term permit, which are typically for around 12 months. Where you are looking to develop a heat scheme, you would be looking for doing testing works, which is abstracting that water, looking at completing a pumping test to establish the rates of abstraction, the rates of discharge, and how the scheme would operate. And to do that, we would enter into an access agreement, which is a legal document that can provide a longer term permission to grant access to the property. After a scheme is developed, you can look at transferring your access agreement onto an operational phase, where you could then operate your scheme with appropriate sort of controls, monitoring and mitigation for a number of years through that permission. To operate a scheme, there may well be other permissions that are required as well as that of the Mining Remediation Authority. And typically this would be the environmental regulator, so the Environment Agency, Natural Resources Wales, or the Scottish Environment Protection Agency. There may also be planning permissions that could be required, particularly for the surface infrastructure, and there will also potentially be requirements to notify the health and safety executive of your proposals. So in applying for an access agreement, we have a series of application forms and documents that have been developed. So once you've got your permits and you've done your initial exploratory work and wish to start your testing, there is an application form which will set out some scheme-specific details. So this includes things such as your site surface area, who you are as an applicant, any contractors and drillers that you may use, what your actual proposal is, so the depth of the mine workings or the seams that you'll want to operate within. So it's just the general details in order to process an application. That document would then be supplemented by some technical information, which is important so that we can understand the risks of the scheme and how those risks have been assessed, so that we can manage those risks or identify what they are and what the level of that risk is in that area. And these predominantly relate to mine gas, water levels, water chemistry, and ground stability. So where our mine workings are flooded, the water level monitoring can establish that the workings remain flooded to help to monitor and mitigate the risk of gas, just as one example within that. So in terms of the technical submission and the technical details that are required, it's information to do with how the water's been abstracted, where the water would be abstracted from, how it would be discharged and to where, the rate of the pumping test that you would want to carry out, or the rate of pumping for an operational scheme. That submission would also need to look at the hydrogeological balance and pathways between the abstraction and discharge. So what we're looking there is actually what is happening with the water underground, what is happening with the workings within the water within the workings. Is it staying balanced? Is the water levels not dropping below levels that may release gas, for example, or they're not rising? And this can be managed through that process. And we would then look for a monitoring strategy within that. So to apply for an access agreement, we've got that general details of the access form, application form, and there are two other documents that form a key part of that. One would be the Annex A borehole details table, and that's the table that's set out on the slide, where we're looking at how many boreholes there are, what their purpose is, the depths with which they're drilled to, how they're cased, what their diameter is, as an example. So it's looking that the boreholes are fit for the purpose of what they were intended for, and that they can be utilised for the longer term. Also, the Annex B technical submission, which will include a lot of the details that are referred to on the previous slide, where we'd be looking at things such as the monitoring strategy and how the risks are being managed. What we have done is we have developed jointly with the Environment Agency a process chart to take an operator through the different stages that would be required in securing the permissions. And this is the headline of what that process is. So you can see that there's a number of different colours here. Where you can see text that's in a blue box, these are activities that are required for the Mining Remediation Authority. And where it is green, it's the Environment Agency. There is some duplication in there in terms of documents that are submitted to both, but they're set out separately to make it clearer that the stages involved doing that. What this also shows is, with the mix of the colour bands there, is actually how the two organisations' permissions just work together. There are also tasks within there that are for the operator, such as drilling of the borehole, completing their pumping test. As you would go through the process from a permit through to a testing phase and through to an operational phase, the information that is submitted at each of those stages will get more and more detail. It will become less desk-based and more based on the testing and the monitoring that has been completed. So until the boreholes have been drilled, the monitoring, the water levels, the dipping, the chemistry tests, etc., won't necessarily be completed until after that stage, and there'll be more understanding of the workings as the testing continues. This document has also got some supporting notes with it that set out a little bit more detail about what each stage involves and where to access the information that you might need to do that. So in summary, access to coal mine workings can be facilitated by the Mining Remediation Authority to help to facilitate a scheme to utilise the water and the warmth and the temperature within that water. The application process focuses on providing assurances that protect public safety and property, and to help to facilitate a scheme that actually can be delivered and can continuously be delivered. The details of that are provided within the technical submission documents. Next steps. So tomorrow, Dr. Fiona Todd will be doing a presentation on the research, because research is a key component of realising the potential of this opportunity, and is going to inform the ongoing development of the industry. In May of this year, there is an online Mine Water Energy Symposium that you may wish to have a look at signing up for. There's 2 sessions there. It's free to register, and it's just, you will get an opportunity to hear from different people within the industry from both the UK and further afield. So, as a final sort of comment there, we've got the QR code will take you to the appropriate web page where there's the information that we have published in providing access, the documentation that you might need. And that is a page that is continually being updated at this present time. I've got the email address there for the team if you want any further information, if you want to get in contact with us, if you want to talk about a little bit more detail about how you might want to go through a permissions process. And there is also the web address, is the web address that you would access if you were to click on to the QR code. So thank you for listening, and I will